sometime after week 4 when they select their garden site, and week 5 is when the garden build is going to happen, if it doesn't already exist. One of the things you should know by now is really which crops are going to be planted this season. In this area, in the chart that we shared earlier that you should have a copy of, is some of those fill in the blanks of those 6 crops that you're going to be able to grow during this growing season. Keep in mind that to have a garden that really works, the kids are involved in all aspects of it, including the very straightforward notion of establishing those garden rules and having the kids plan how the garden area will be maintained. One of the best solutions for maintaining it is not just doing it ourselves, but having the kids be responsible for deciding how it's going to happen. So one solution is having the students break into committees, and they divvy up those responsibilities and schedule the dates that they're going to provide for those needs. The 3 primary areas we're talking about within this lesson is being able to make sure the garden is watered and weeded and feeded. And as an example, those kids that are part of the watering committee, they will simply decide which days of the week are going to be checking on if the garden needs to be watered and place a water drop on that date in the calendar. The other 2 committees of weeding and feeding need to be done less often. But as we got some great feedback from some of the other teachers working on this project, we realized that it's kind of hard to break the kids up into just 3 groups. There's too many kids per group. So this one particular teacher that had successful experience recommended 2 additional groups, and that was a garden security committee, and they made sure the other groups did their jobs. They made sure all of the supplies were put away, and they worked to maintain the garden being taken care of. The other one was a thank you committee, and their job was to always look for ways to express appreciation for others that help support the gardens, whether it was a volunteer or a school secretary or custodial support, whatever the case may be. They might write thank you notes or do some cutting from something growing in the garden and share it with others. Their job is always look for ways to be gracious to people who are supporting the garden project. The second lesson for week 5 is a simple My Plate exercise, and as we have this improvement from the My Pyramid to the My Plate visual, the kids are going to use a simple paper plate folded into quarters, and that's about the right proportions of the different food groups, and they're going to illustrate their favorite food, an example of a good healthful meal. In addition to that, they're going to attach a cup or a smaller paper plate to represent that dairy group. So it's a great way for kids to be able to come up with examples of foods from the different food groups. Week 6 is fun. It's going to be an experience where kids are going to plug into some veggie research and take part in installing some graffiti artwork in the garden. The lesson starts in week 6 with kids doing a research project, and there are some data charts that are part of the curriculum that you make copy of for students or for groups of students, and they would pull data off the chart to fill in the vegetable that they are going to be responsible for planting. They're going to be researching. Then we're going to do some art projects. We're going to use some reclaimed stones. These can be stones or bricks or pieces of broken curbs. It doesn't really matter as long as there's some type of flat surface, and the groups are going to be responsible for creating 3 different stones. One's going to be a label stone that you see here for the crop. Another is going to be a benefit stone that somehow illustrates what benefit we get from eating that particular vegetable. And then there's a vitamin stone that shows specifically which vitamin, which nutrient that vegetable is especially high in. This is going to be an exercise where you're gathering stones and paint supplies, and so this is a great way to incorporate some volunteer support, whether it's from the county office, whether it's a bank of some parent volunteers. The whole notion of gathering stones and setting a date with you as the teacher and working with the volunteers, and really having those volunteers be part of that paint day. Having a classroom full of kids with paint brushes and paints, it's great to have extra sets of hands to be a part of that day. That's not something we would anticipate the teacher having to do by themselves. And for the second lesson in week 6, the students are going to be presented with this an advertisement for the Biggie Cheesy Kids Meal. For only $1.99, the kids will be able to enjoy a delicious and complete meal that represents all 5 food groups. It's good for you and your wallet. In this lesson, the students can be presented with the idea of needing to be discriminating against advertisements, media messages that they're presented with all of the time. And they're going to be critical of this ad, thinking about, does it really represent all 5 food groups? And as the lesson helps guide the students through, really in a stretch, all of those items on that Biggie Cheesy Kids meal could represent a food group, although it's probably not the best examples of foods from that group. So we're going to further classify what the students are being presented with meals as ingredient items as being go foods or woe foods, and the intermediate is slow foods. So go foods are foods that you can eat really as much as you want to. Woes are those foods that are high in salt and sugar and fats, high calorie but not very much nutrient value, and those are ones we don't want to eat very much of. And slow are those in between that we can eat a moderate amounts of. So as kids are thinking about how to think about foods and how to categorize them, they're then prompted to take the foods that are on that Big and Cheesy Kids meal and find other replacements, examples of things that are a little bit more healthful choices of ingredients on that Big and Cheesy Kids meal.